Indian Lake. It's 8 o'clock.
Good morning. This is Northern Light for Friday, July 31st. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
North Country health officials say now is the time to make sure your kids are up to date on their back-to-school shots.
You know, at this point, I think most people have experienced firsthand that domino effect that can happen with spreading of COVID-19, from one person to the next. And this can be really true for many other vaccine-preventable conditions, too.
The PACT Act, passed last year, makes millions of veterans eligible for new benefits, including post-9/11 vets who were exposed to burn pits, but the deadline to file is August 9th. Also, we'll talk with silent movie expert Ben Modell. He'll accompany on piano a screening of the 1923 film Safety Last at the Strand Theater in Schroon Lake tonight.
One of the things we film accompanists do is that we're sensing the vibe in the room. So there's this Venn diagram between the audience and the film, the audience and me and the audience, me and the film, and the audience and the film. And where that all intersects is what silent film really is.
All of that and more is coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by the Village Mercantile, bringing Saranac Lake to places beyond the Adirondacks, offering Adirondack-made and inspired goods, villagemerc.com, anything but general. And by Apothecary Chocolates, making gourmet chocolates by hand from all natural herbs, botanicals, and tree syrups, apothecarychocolates.com.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. A Messina man has been sentenced to at least 22 years in prison for the murder of a SUNY Potsdam student last year. Lucy Grindon reports.
Judge Craig Carrero sentenced Michael Snow to a minimum of 22 years in prison on Friday for the murder of SUNY Potsdam student Elizabeth Howell in February of last year. Snow admitted to killing Howell last month when he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder charges. Howell was a 21-year-old music education student from Paterson, New York, studying at the Crane School. The St. Lawrence County District Attorney has characterized her death as a random act of violence. She was shot on a street near the SUNY Potsdam campus. She died at the hospital shortly afterwards. According to WWNY-TV and the Watertown Daily Times, District Attorney Gary Pasqua said Snow confessed to plotting to create bad press for SUNY Potsdam before he killed Powell. Pasqua said that Snow wanted to harm a former co-worker who was then employed at SUNY Potsdam by randomly killing one of the university's students. According to the Times, Pasqua said Snow tried to buy AR-15 rifles twice in 2020 without success. Lucy Grindon, North Country Public Radio.
The North Country's children are just weeks away from heading back to school. In New York State, that means they have to be up to date on all their vaccines for measles, polio, and chickenpox. Carly Zimmerman with the St. Lawrence County Public Health Department says immunizations are still the best way to prevent illness and lasting impacts from vaccine-preventable diseases.
Students who are not fully vaccinated, unfortunately, they pose a risk for creating a disease outbreak in their own communities just by attending school.
Zimmerman spoke with Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman about how families can get their kids the shots they need and how COVID has affected immunization efforts.
At this point, I think most people have experienced firsthand that domino effect that can happen with spreading of COVID-19, from one person to the next. And this can be really true for many other vaccine-preventable conditions, too, so not just COVID.
Right. And that kind of plays into another topic I wanted to get to. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen immunization of school-age children kind of face some setbacks, like when children weren't going to school in person for long periods of time. Can you talk about, how did that play out in St. Lawrence County and the North Country, and have things rebounded at all since then?
Yeah, so the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely resulted in some difficulties, and there's been some reservations regarding accessing health care, even primary care. So, children that would normally gone to see their doctor for their well child visit and gotten their vaccines that they needed. It just didn't happen in that same frequency that it has, the past couple of years. We are still doing quite a bit of work in education, getting information out to the community about increasing those rates of vaccination. So it's certainly a work in progress.
Can you talk a bit more about, how people's approaches to and attitudes toward, vaccinating their kids has changed, over the past few years?
I think people have certainly have their questions regarding vaccinations. And I think there's been some concerns regarding the rollout of the vaccines and the speed at which they were rolled out. So I think there's been a lot of concerns there. However, there's been a lot of information that has been put out about the safety regarding the vaccines and the requirements and the rigorous studies that need to occur before those vaccines are actually released to the public. But I think in general, there's just been a lot of concerns voiced.
To parents and families who are feeling, apprehensive about getting their children vaccinated, what's your message to them?
Ask your questions. Don't be concerned and kind of hang on to that anxiety. You can reach out to your primary care provider. They are happy to talk with you, and they're the ones that are most familiar, with you and your child's health. You can also look at some resources online. We have information on our website at stlawco.gov. American Academy of Pediatrics, New York State Department of Health, and CDC are all great reputable resources to get those questions answered.
What's the easiest way for families to get their children vaccinated?
Yeah, so certainly reaching out to your child's doctor's office, just seeing if they can fit you in for vaccinations or calling to see what vaccinations are needed. And we really are encouraging parents and guardians to do that now, just before the fall, before those appointments start to fill up. And if, parents and guardians aren't able to get those appointments with their pediatricians, they can certainly come to our clinic here at the St. Lawrence County Public Health Department.
And is there a specific cutoff date for when the kids need to have everything up to date before they can go back to school?
As required, children need to have proof of vaccination within 14 days of the start of school. So children can actually be excluded from school if they don't have the vaccinations that they needed.
And Carly, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you feel is important for people to know?
I think simply, the importance of the vaccines themselves, the difference between the child actually having the illness and potentially having lasting impacts. I don't think we always quite think about the long-term impacts of a condition. I think we tend to think more about the acute illness itself. And I think, as we go forward, especially with COVID, and we learn more about, what those lasting impacts are for people that have experienced COVID, I think we're going to find that with a lot of other conditions as well.
I'm wondering if you have any, kids, littles in your life that you think about, when you're talking about like kids getting vaccinated, going back to school, and how you think about them in that context.
I do have a little of my own. They're actually going to be starting some preschool soon. It's a little bit more formal instruction. Being a parent with a little who was born not that long before the start of the pandemic, concerns about infectious disease, I think, has always been on my mind with her. So for my own, child and own other littles in my life, I try to do my best to ensure that they aren't going to get sick, washing hands and making sure that they're getting their vaccines on time. If they are sick, keeping them home.
Carly Zimmerman is with the St. Lawrence County Public Health Department. She spoke with Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman. Starting this week, her agency is offering back-to-school vaccinations on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Appointments are required. Other health departments throughout the North Country are also holding their own clinics.
And as kids are heading back to school, many parents are also thinking about childcare. Late last week, New York State opened applications for its Child Care Workforce Retention Grant Program. That's $500 million that can be used to give existing and new child care staff bonuses of around $2,500. The hope is that these one-time grants will help retain and recruit child care staff. The state lost a significant number of child care providers and workers during the pandemic. The Workforce Retention Grant Program is one of many new child care initiatives that the state hopes will build back child care capacity across New York.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8:11. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Just ahead, we talk with Ben Modell about music and silent movies. That conversation in just a couple of minutes here on Northern Light.
This is music by Hank Soto in Stony Creek. Check out more of his music and that of lots of regional musicians. Check out our website on the underscore page at ncpr.org/underscore. Northern Light is supported by Adirondack Experience, the museum on Blue Mountain Lake, presenting a full season of events and activities, now open 7 days a week. Tickets at the adkx.org. And Seal Festival in Scroon Lake, bringing opera and musical theater to the Adirondacks since 1915. More at seagullfestival.org.
The VA is receiving a surge of claims ahead of a major deadline for the PACT Act. That's the law that made more than 3 million veterans eligible for additional health benefits. The surge has led to concerns about long wait times at the VA and at volunteer agencies helping veterans apply. Steve Walsh of the American Homefront Project reports.
Well, you're rewarded.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
One of Hugh Reed's clients showed him an approval letter from the VA.
This is wonderful news. And you know what? That's why I do what I'm doing. Now you guys are giving me joy.
Reed is a former Marine and a Vietnam vet. These days, he's also a volunteer at the American Legion post in Norfolk, where he's helped other vets file VA claims.
You know, so I just want to share with the veterans some of the experiences that I've had, some of the knowledge that I've done, and I want to pass it on to them.
The VA had been cutting into its long-standing backlog of claims, which had been made worse during the pandemic. But when Congress passed the PACT Act last August, it opened up a whole new category of benefits for post-9/11 veterans exposed to burn pits and others. Reed is concerned as the VA's backlog has started to rise again.
It's going to get overwhelmed. I mean, of course, they had to do more hiring to accommodate all of this, but it can be problematic because when you get more claims, that means more paperwork is going in.
The VA pledged to hire 2,000 more people nationwide to handle claims, but it also relies heavily on a nationwide army of independent volunteers who are trained to help veterans file claims. On the ground at the American Legion, Veteran Service Officer Eric Isaacson says it's not easy for service organizations to match the VA's hiring with new volunteers. Some vets wait for appointments.
To be a good service officer, it's hard to work a full-time job and do this. And so you got to be retired.
So far, hypertension is the number one claim under the PACT Act. More than 100,000 of the nearly 400,000 claims. That's because the law now grants benefits for hypertension as another condition tied to Agent Orange, the toxic defoliant used in Vietnam. Veterans of that war have been quick to apply. But the VA needs to do a better job of finding post 9/11 veterans, says Caitlin Yancey with the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America.
Reaching the veterans in their local communities, so food banks, community centers, anywhere that you can think of, the local grocery store, just putting out information and making sure that it's as inclusive as humanly possible.
The largest new group covered by the law are Gulf War veterans and post 9/11 veterans. For the first time, the law acknowledges the long-term health impact of burn pits. Eric Hall served in Iraq in 2007-2008, where he was around troops burning car batteries, dead animals, and even human waste, all mixed with jet fuel.
And you have to literally sit there and stir it. And so you're over it. It's not a set and forget type thing. Yeah, I mean, being over there at the time it was definitely, you're exposed to a lot of those exposures.
Originally, he didn't associate his chronic pneumonia and asthma with his experience in Iraq, which is not uncommon among younger vets.
As an infantry guy, we're conditioned to just be like, you just push through it. You just push through it. It's one of the same issues we have with getting people to admit that they had issues and had PTSD.
When he did finally apply, the VA turned him down. Now he's appealing.
Because I'm hoping this is not a sign of things to follow. This is supposed to be super streamlined. It's supposed to be assumed service-connected.
So far, veteran organizations which have fought for these benefits for years are giving the VA relatively high marks. Veterans and their survivors have an extra incentive to apply by August 9th because their claims will be backdated to when the law was passed last year. It's also the next test for how well the VA will be able to handle the surge. In Norfolk, I'm Steve Walsh.
This story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration that reports on American military life and veterans.
The Court of Appeals is upholding the felony and fraud convictions of David Decker, former director of the Lake George Watershed Coalition. The decision was announced last week. Decker from Burnt Hills was found guilty of 6 felonies. This is after the Warren County District Attorney's Office showed evidence of Decker stealing thousands of dollars in New York and federal grant money while overseeing environmental projects in the region. The court also upheld that Decker filed false state tax returns. He failed to report hundreds of thousands of dollars in income, some of which was funneled through youth basketball tournaments. The court is sticking with Decker's initial 8 to 24-year state prison sentence. He will return to the Warren County Court to start serving his time.
Quite a bit of wildlife news this morning. First, the invasive forest pest beach leaf disease was found for the first time in Warren County. DEC forest health technicians found it in the Edgecombe Pond parcel in the town of Bolton. Beach leaf disease was first reported in the Adirondacks in 2022 in Herkimer County. It's been in the U.S. since 2012. Beach leaf disease kills both young and mature beech trees. A large die-off of beech trees in the Adirondacks would be devastating for the many animals that rely on it as a major food source. The Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program will be conducting surveys to try and understand the extent of the beech leaf disease infestation in the park. They're also training volunteers to look for the disease through their Forest Pest Hunters program.
Also, a horse in Lewis County recently tested positive for the West Nile virus, a serious and sometimes fatal illness that's primarily spread by mosquitoes. This is the first confirmed case of West Nile virus in the county in over 10 years. Lewis County Public Health says this summer's heavy rains and warmer, humid weather have created the perfect environment for breeding mosquitoes across the county and the North Country. The health department is urging residents to take precautions against mosquito bites, like using insect repellent, clearing gutters and yards, and removing sources of standing water on your property, including kiddie pools, watering cans, or tires. There is no human vaccine for West Nile virus, and the health department says the best defense is preventing mosquito bites in the first place.
And Senators Schumer and Gillibrand announced $2.5 million to restore fish habitats across the Great Lakes last week. The funding is part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative in an effort to protect the environment and preserve the natural beauty of New York. The money comes from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It includes $1 billion to restore the Great Lakes, and it's the largest investment in the initiative to date.
This is North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up in just a minute, music and silent movies in Schroon Lake. Then join NCPR and the Adirondack Explorer magazine at lunchtime today. We're working together to convene a conversation about race, diversity, and inclusion in the Adirondacks. And it starts with you. Join us for a listening session this afternoon at 12:30 at the Adirondack Center for Writing in Saranac Lake. Tell us what you're seeing and hearing about race and diversity where you live. That's today, Monday, July 31st, today at 12:30 in the afternoon at the Adirondack Center for Writing in Saranac Lake. We hope to see you there. And now Todd has a look at the weather for us.
We've got some scattered showers, maybe a thunderstorm today, highs in the 70s, and then lows tonight in the 40s and 50s. Tomorrow and Wednesday, partly to mostly sunny skies. It'll be cooler this week, though, with highs in the low to mid 70s on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. Again, partly cloudy, a scattered shower possible today with highs in the 70s, light winds out of the southwest.
The Strand Theater in Schroon Lake will mark the centennial of a classic silent movie comedy tonight. Harold Lloyd's Safety Last, with its iconic image of Lloyd's character hanging from a clock, is one of the most enduring films from the silent movie era. It'll be screened tonight in Schroon Lake's Art Deco Strand Theater at 8 p.m. The movie's plot was Lloyd playing a country boy who set out from his hometown of Great Bend to make good in the big city. His sweetheart promises to marry him once he is a success, but how to do that is the question.
One of the world's leading silent film accompanists, Ben Modell, will perform his own piano compositions to accompany Safety Last at tonight's screening. Ben has created and performed thousands of live scores for several hundred silent films over the last 4 decades. He performs at theaters, museums, schools, and other venues across the U.S. and internationally. And he told me a little bit about the craft of accompanying a silent movie.
My method is based on improvisation. I've developed a musical language that still sounds like it's music of the time, because the score has to exist within the film and not outside of it, I think. And I learned my craft from a guy who was a movie organist in the 1920s. And there are some themes that I use every time I play for this film, but the audience is always different. The audience reaction is always different.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we film accompanists do is that out of our sixth sense, out of the back of our neck, we're sensing the vibe in the room. So I'm watching the screen. That's like my sheet music to a certain extent. And then supporting the mood or the rhythm of the gags, knowing the film really well. But I'm also listening to the audience. And depending on the level of enthusiasm, it's always there. But the level, I may play things a little different, and I'm still... The ebb and flow of the music is still, it's both locked. There's this Venn diagram between the audience and the film, the audience and me and the audience, me and the film, and the audience and the film. And where that all intersects is what silent film really is. And the other part of the answer is I have absolutely no idea how it happens. But, I look up, the film starts, I put my hands on the keys, and off we go. It's really a happening, as soon as the lights come up, it's over. I mean, I may play for the film the next day, and some of the score it won't be note for note the same, but the way I handle every different sequence is usually the same. Although I've had a few opportunities to accompany Safety Last this year, and I'm still working on the climb, and what else? Like, how can I make it better? And it's really mostly for me, because the audience, this film just never fails. But for me, I think, maybe there's some way I can support some of these gags even better, because they worked so hard on it. I feel like I owe it to Harold Lloyd and his writing staff, to see if I can make the film go over as well as they wanted it to in 1923.
So with all due respect, I'm wondering if the ideal accompanist for these silent films is the whole idea here is that you become part of the film. So in a way, you sort of, your presence in the theater, you don't really want to be seen, right? I mean, you're kind of like a puppeteer or something in a way, right?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. The idea is to forget I'm there. The idea is for the music to be seamless and comfortable, like an old sweater. You put it on, you forget about it. Oh, I'm comfortable. I'm having a great time. So the music's got to sound, like I said, it's got to sound like it comes from inside the film and not be doing anything gimmicky or calls attention to itself. And it's got to sound like music to some extent that what people expect from film scoring in terms of the way it supports it. Yeah, so my friend and mentor, Lee Irwin, who's the theater organist I mentioned before, he said the best thing you can hear from somebody after a show is, "I forgot you were playing." And as a composer and performer, it's an unusual thing to aim for. But even if people come up to me after a show and instead of saying something nice about my playing, we talk about sequences from the film, I'll take that as a compliment, is that you forgot the score so much that we're just not even talking about it, but that you've enjoyed the film and what Harold and his staff have, made 100 years ago. And the audience is also involved with the experience, because that's the thing. As much as the term silent film sounds off-putting, you're actually way more involved. It's actually more like playing video games where you're involved in the screen experience, because with silent film, in the universe of silent film, we're being given little pieces of information, and then as an audience, and you're not even aware it's happening, but it happens from the moment the film starts. You're stitching all these pieces together in your right brain. So, great film historian and preservationist Kevin Brownlow once said that with silent film, the audience is the final participant in the filmmaking process. There are little bits of our own human experience that we add to being shown this and shown that and shown this, and then put it all together. A shot of Harold Lloyd looking down, and then an overhead shot looking at the street below, and then cutting back to Harold. That's three separate little static bits of information, but we say, "Oh my gosh, she's terrified," because we put that together. Because if it was, I see this guy and I look at the street below and, oh my gosh. So again, you're not even aware it's happening. But this is why movies made 100 years ago still work with any audience anywhere on the planet of any age.
That was going to be my question, are they still, really viable, and sort of, do you see young people coming to these shows?
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. That's great.
Oh, yeah. We did a show last year. Last year we showed Buster Keaton and Steamboat Bill Jr., and we had a few kids in the audience, and somebody came up to me with his young son, 7 or 8 or 9, and he said, "This is my son. He's the biggest Buster Keaton fan in the Adirondacks." So there aren't, millions of 20-year-olds running to silent film shows, but because it's almost a form of a theater of the mind. It's something that anybody can understand. I mean, once you're in the theater, you get it, how much fun it is. And people always say, if they've come for the first time, this was way more fun than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, and it's very encouraging for me to continually meet people, half my age or even younger, who are showing up in a derby or a straw hat, or just huge fans of silent film. And I think it's because it's all rooted in the human experience that we can all identify something with. And it's interesting. There's this trend with younger people watching streaming shows with the captioning on. So it's the same thing. We have title cards in the silent films as well.
Harold Lloyd's